G'day and welcome to Quilting with Don, Part 8. Here's a long anticipated episode. Okay, maybe not that long anticipated, maybe not that anticipated, but here it is. I am going to now put the borders on my quilt top. I am going to use two borders. It's going to have an inner border which is thin, and I'll mock it up so you get the idea. But this yellow fabric. The yellow is not as intense as the yellow here, but I think it has a nice contrast to set up the next border, which is really cool. And as you might have expected for a kitty quilt, the next border is kitties. It's so cool. So it's a 6-inch border this time. The previous one, the yellow one, is about 2 inches. This is 6 inches. You can see here what it's going to look like. All the way around, you're going to have the kitty quilt, a narrower yellow band followed by the kitties in the border. That's going to go all the way around. The process for doing that is pretty straightforward. You do one border I'm going to do one border at a time. So first I'll sew the yellow border all the way around, and then the kitty border all the way around. To do that, I'm going to do simple rectangular borders. No fancy joining and mitered corners. This is going to be straightforward. So the thing to do, as Carolyn explained to me when you're adding your borders, is to measure your quilt, not at the top and not at the bottom, but a little bit down, because the tops tend to stretch a little bit when you're pulling on it. You get a more accurate representation to keep your quilt square if you're measuring them for the borders. And this, I'm going to say one row down, one set of blocks down. And I measured it. This is 50.5 inches from there to there, as it is in the middle, as it is near the bottom. So it's a nice true measurement left to right. Same for the top to bottom. It is 60.75, 60 3/4 inches from there to the bottom, there to the bottom, and there to the bottom. So I've got a fairly square quilt, which is a good thing. It does flare a little bit at the top and bottom. Carolyn said that's to be expected. So when I put on the borders, I pin them, and that should theoretically bring everything in line. I measure the borders, what I just told you. I cut them, I sew them, and see how we do. And of course iron them. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut my yellow fabric borders. And there's a bit of math involved, as there seems to be in everything you do with sewing and quilting. And the inner borders are easy because it's all it's a single color. There's no patterns I have to worry about. So I can just add up the number of length of the borders I need, and then make sure I cut enough of them. So it's very simple. Given the measurements I gave you, 50.5 this way and 60 3/4 that way, and the fact is when you add the top and bottom border, then your side border is going to actually be a little longer. They're going to stick up beyond the original piece because they got to match up with the new top and bottom borders you just added. So to add all those things up, I need 230 inches. Well, my width of fabric is around 44 inches. It's a little more, but I mean 44 is a safe number. So how many times do I have to cut 44 inches worth of fabric to get 230? Well, the answer is 6. I need to cut 6 strips. So that's what I'm going to do. It sounds simple, doesn't it? So that should be all the material I need for the border. All right, so let the sewing begin. What I'm going to do, and my quilting advisor just gave me a great idea. Carolyn, I don't know how I would do this without her, because I would be learning everything for the first time. As it is, it's hard. And if I didn't have Carolyn, it would be 3 times as hard. But she suggested I just sew all my borders together end to end in one shot. So that then I just cut off what I need for each border, and whatever's left over is left over. That was a pretty good idea. Well, let me tell you what happened since we last talked. I sewed all my strips, and before I get into sewing them onto the quilt top, which you see over here, I did have to do technically an unsew, because one of the joins that I made with the thin strips was misaligned just a bit, and I didn't like it. So, I mean, I could have unsewed it, but what I ended up doing was just doing one cut very near the stitch line and then reassembling the two pieces more carefully. So it was a 5-minute fix, but it needed to be done. Now the second thing I'm going to talk about before I start sewing is right behind me. So there we are. You can see it a little better now. I did another wee video where I assembled, I Bargello-ized a jelly roll quilt. I had to think of what it was called again. So I took a regular jelly roll quilt top that Carolyn had already made, and then I Bargello-ized it. So there's a Quilting with Dawn video on that in case you're curious how this came together. What Carolyn did while I was doing other things is add a border to it. So what I'm doing now with my quilt, Carolyn just did with this other quilt. And I think it looks really good. I think it looks fabulous. The colors just, they pop, they work. So this one is going to go through the same process as the kitty quilt. It's going to get actually quilted on the big machine, on the long arm machine. All right, so yeah, I'm going to leave it up there now because it gives me a nice background while I'm working on this other guy. So, where did I put my glasses? There they are. Here is, I have pinned the border, the top border, onto the kitty quilt. So that's what I'm just going to sew it now. This was as anticipated. I measured the yellow border and it's just a little shorter than the top of the quilt because the top of the quilt for whatever reason flared. So I added pins as much to make sure that when I'm sewing along that the fabric stays together and doesn't pucker or wrinkle. Oh, for heaven's sakes. I do have this upside down. The other was supposed to go on top. What the hell happened there? I'll fix it. No wonder it was acting so weird. I might have to see if it comes out okay, but that's why it was acting so weird. I had it upside down. Weird, weird, weird. This is going to work much better now. And done. Now I might just have to unsew one section here after I iron it. I will see. Yeah, but now that I had it right side up, suddenly way easier. I ironed and examined my first border, and I must regretfully report I did have to do an unsew. On that last section, you notice I was wrestling with it and fighting with it, and I ended up saying, oh, I got to flip it over. In that area, it went wonky. So I had to unsew, what is it, 6 inches? Anyway, I had to unsew about 6 inches. But that was quick. And away we go. My sewing is not as good as I thought it was. Turns out I got cocky, and Carolyn was very quick to point out the error of my ways. But again, I gotta say it again, thank goodness for Carolyn, because otherwise it wouldn't be right. And nobody wants that. So what I had done in my full throttle sewing is I had not paid attention to the back side of the fabric, and it had slipped a bit. Either I didn't pin it properly or just I didn't do it, it slipped. So when I had a look at my seams, this top one was okay. I didn't go as quickly as that one, but the one I did the second time around, my seam was not good. The color, the backing here had shifted, and whereas I instead of a 1/4 inch, I had more like 3/16 and some points an 1/8. So when you pressed it, you could see right away that it wasn't even. So that required 2 more unsews. There we are. Now I'm ready to do the side with yellow, and I've already measured it. It's 63 7/8. If it would have been, math would have said, it's a good thing I remeasured, math would have said 63 3/4 if I had exactly perfect 1/4 inch seams. That tells me, and I have to agree, that my seams are just a touch less than a 1/4 inch. Therefore, it's a little wider than it needs to be. It's a little taller than it needs to be by all of an 1/8 of an inch. A mathematician would say that that's that's within tolerances. I don't know what a quilter would say, but I think it's all right. So I'm now going to cut. I've already cut 63 7/8 inch strips. Now I'm going to pin them and sew them. Checking in. I can report mostly success. You can't see the bottom, but you can see that I've done the border, yellow border all the way around. That went pretty well. On the sides, I had to do a wee bit of correction, but I don't consider them full unsews. So if I add up the 2 corrections I had to make, and each of them's a half unsew, I'm going to add 1 more unsew, and maybe being a little cheating a bit, but they were fussy. I wanted them perfect. So it's going all right. Now the next phase is adding the outer kitty borders, and if you may recall, it looks like this. It's very cute cats. Here's the interesting thing about this fabric is it's unidirectional. The kitties are only going to go in one direction, that is their heads are going to be up. So when I cut this fabric for the borders, I mean this here it's easy, right? The kitties are already up. And I would then cut strips this way. But for the top and bottom, then I have to cut the strips the other way. I have to cut them across the top, if you will, so that the kitties still stay standing up on the top and bottom. So it's just a bit of trickiness, but it's not insurmountable. In fact, before I even started with any of these cuttings for either the other border or this border, I did my measurements and determined that I do have enough fabric to do this. So yeah, next phase now is to cut the top and bottom borders. I have now sewn the top and the bottom kitties on the Lap Kitties quilt. The top one, I did have to do a 1 unsew, but the bottom one was perfection, no unsewing. So I'll log 1 more unsew, but each unsew is getting smaller and smaller. So now we're on the last step, or last set of borders for the quilt. So I measured top to bottom, and it was, I wrote it down here because I've already forgotten. It was 75 3/4 inches. And I measured from here and from here. Remember, you don't measure at the edges because you might have a bit of flex. So, there's a thread here. Anyway, squirrel. So I cut my borders. And again, remember it was a unidirectional fabric for the kitties. So I ended up twisting the fabric around 90 degrees. So I didn't cut in this direction. I cut in that, up and down. I'm doing the first of the 2 side borders. And I have never sewn something this big before. Carolyn gave me a lot of help getting it pinned right. And I use lots of pins. I mean, a lot of pins. And I've got this quilt all bundled up in my lap. And it's already porked me a couple times with the pins. But I guess that's the threat. That's the nature of the... Hey, I wonder if you get hazard pay for sewing. You would in the military, I bet. And done the first of the 2 sides. So I'll report back once I've checked it out. The first border was really well done, the first vertical border. In fact, no unsew is required. Maybe that shouldn't be the best measurement of how well one is sewing, but there we are. Given that I really am trying to make this as good as possible, no unsews means that it's as good as possible. Well, okay, I'm sure Carolyn looked at it, she'd probably have something to say, but I think it's darn good for me, and I'm happy with it.
Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of the team. Everything is awesome when we're living our dream. 3, 2, 1, go.
Have you heard the news? Everyone's talking. Life is good cause everything's awesome. Lost my job.
And done, theoretically. I'll report back. But if you see the quilt on the wall behind me, then it is done. And done. So clearly, you can see that I don't have to do any unsewing because here we are. My beautiful Lap Kitties quilt. I am so excited. I tell you, I learned a lot about precision again this time around, and pinning and making sure that everything lines up. I really got to give sewers and quilters a lot of credit here, because if they're if there's anything, if that's the one thing I've learned, is that you cannot be too precise. You really can't. It's got to line up. It's got to work. And with talking to Carolyn, she also tells me the better you sew the top, the easier it is to quilt, which is going to be the next step. So, next step, like I said, is going to be getting this thing ready to quilt with the batting and the backing. Oh, hey, check this out. Give you a teaser. This is the batting I got. Okay. Backing. Can you see the little kitties on that? I'll get it closer. Hopefully it'll focus on it. Look at that. They are so cute. So that's the backing I'm going to use. I got it from Missouri Star as well. And on that note, thank you for tuning in, and stay tuned for when we put this on the long arm machine and actually quilt it.